playing on the field, even though those policies weren't activated yet.
Yeah, and for you guys' information, these scenarios that we're going through are real life scenarios, and not because we thought that they didn't go well, because we thought they went really well. And the policy governance helped us in that. So I kind of walked through what Stacy just did and was like, okay, I need to make sure it's council holism, that council is looking at that collectively. I needed to make sure that staff was doing their job of the delegated authority, but as soon as it got to the point of the sale or purchase of real property, like that was where I had to draw the line, and then council had to be involved. And so I felt like we walked through from a staff level as far as we could before it was, all right, now we have to get council involved, we have to get their approval, but we're making the recommendation to council of this is what we think we should be offering. And then had to be as timely as possible in setting that meeting so that you all could be there. And I thought it went really well, and we moved as quickly as government can work. And council reviewed the offer and the financial incentive and thumbs up, and I think we felt empowered with the work that we were doing to move forward, and I thought it went really well. I mean, it's always challenging when you're trying to get council members together and schedules and everybody at the same table, but we knew once we hit that point where they were asking for that like financial incentive associated with real property, for our interpretation, or my interpretation, was that was what triggered the council needing to be involved. I know it wasn't actually the sale, but it was making an offer per se on what we'd be willing to sell that property for, and so my interpretation was that council needed to be involved at that point.
And I think we got 2 rounds of information.
Uh-huh.
Initially, the first go around, and yeah, granted it was short notice, and had to do power that situational. But then the second time, I think we got good feedback on where we had to go or what we thought we had to do, and as far as the offer going back out.
I think the thing I noticed the most was both at the package part and then at the PA part. It seemed like at times on my side, it's like, all right, as council, we're rushing through this. At the same time, it feels that way because the empowerment's on their side and the works are done. So it's just getting used to that. And I think it what's smooth also. It's just nice is you get to step back and be like, all right, are we rushing through this, or yeah, that, you know, that what they're supposed to on their side that is presented to us, ready to stamp it.
Interesting observation. Other observations? And I know you all, I mean, we all know you weren't, those policies aren't live, or weren't live when you were going through this. They weren't live in any of the scenarios we could look at tonight. But you're also living in both worlds, too, where you're thinking, okay, how does this fit into the framework? Or how would it fit into the framework? Did you say something?
Well, I think, I mean, you can armchair quarterback all day long. We were 1 foot in, 1 foot out of this. In the future, so if that happens tomorrow, there likely needs to be a more frequent communication to council. And by that, I mean, because we're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, council was along for the ride for most of it, really helping craft what the proposal would be. In the future, that's on administration, and so if I play that back and remove all of us from what some of those proposals would be, it almost would be like a holy cow, drink from a fire hydrant when we're learning about it for the first time of here's a proposal. And I think it'll take a future council longer to get acclimated to understanding where in this one we had the benefit of being along for the ride. And so I just think about that, like think about what we're offering to and have offered to Niron. If we got that as a memo or it's like our first council meeting, like, hey, we've done this, here's this potential entity coming to town, and here's what we would recommend offering them, like, holy cow, that's a big deal. That I didn't think we had that shock and awe. I think that when I say more frequent communication is to keep council from having that shotgun on in future. It's still a small community. If we have someone like a Niron in town touring, one, two, if not more council members are gonna hear about that through their other channels that I think we just need to be cognizant of.
It's a good observation, cause I mean, almost to Alex's point too, like, the PA kind of functioned in that way. I mean, you guys really didn't see it until I was getting it on email as we were sitting up there. And had that been a similar process all the way through from the beginning, it likely would have been tough for council to even bless and approve that financial incentive package, because you wouldn't have known enough. You were along for the ride on this, but it's just a good reminder for me, and I have to figure out. Right now I use our Friday updates for a lot of that information of like, hey, here's some of the things we're working on, but I just, to Ryan's point, I almost wonder when it's something of this magnitude, it's more of a one-off communication specifically about this project, so that when it does get to their dais and they have to make a decision on it, it's not the first time that they've heard about it. And I also respect and acknowledge that those Friday updates can get long. I mean, to sit and read through every one of them and catch every little detail in there. So it's just a good reminder for us from a staff perspective of over communicating really big decisions like that. On this one, we were kind of along parallel, but going forward, we'll need to be better about that. So that's good feedback.
I'm curious, Rob, and whoever else might have had some involvement in everything that went on behind, do you have any other observations as you're getting more familiar with the policies? Many of you have been involved in the policy developments and the whole getting Project Maxwell off the ground. What was your experience like?
I think it was difficult being 1 foot in and 1 foot out and trying to figure out how we're supposed to operate in a scenario like this. But now that we've gone over it holistically, I can then retrain my mind to think of the next steps in a process like this. So, and I wasn't involved initially. I know it was more community development, but then it was the incentive package that we were throwing together and had to turn around very quickly. So, gosh, it just all happened so fast. I haven't really taken time to consider everything that happened, but I think staff was doing the best job they could, and with this in mind.
Any other observations that you want to share?
I think part of it that Rob touched on was it was such a rapid process and such a pipe dream ultimately of submitting it, and then 2 weeks later you find out that, hey, you're selected, you're also coming next week. And doing a presentation, and now you're navigating what to put in this presentation, and you're like, good, this is all great, but then it gets real. Of now it's not just on paper, now it's real, and what are we providing? That's when we almost had to take like a step back or pump the brakes of, okay, where are we? We're sitting right now. That was interesting, just because we were 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
And one thing that I acknowledge or would like to see us get better from a staff perspective, and Rob and Carrie, you guys can pipe in, but as we were building that financial incentive package, I think it took us talking through, I think it was Ryan and Tim that were on a Teams call, and we were talking through all those items, and you could feel the, uneasiness of like, whoa, are we giving the bank away here? Like, is this the right deal? You were on that call too, and it took all of us getting together to talk that through, including council members, to arrive at the point that we needed data to show that this was worth the economic impact. And so I would love for us at a staff level to get to a place to where we're recognizing that before we're having to have that conversation of like, hey, we know we're going to be bringing a recommendation for a financial incentive package. How are we going to get council support? We pull the data in advance, and that we already knew that we were gonna do that and that maybe it wouldn't have been done by then, but it's like, hey, we're gonna pull this economic impact analysis, but that kind of happened almost naturally as a part of that conversation, and eventually want to get to a place to where that's just second nature for us from a staff perspective. If we're making that big of a recommendation or any recommendation to council, that we're thinking about the data piece that's helping you make that decision on the front side. So that was a big takeaway for me of like, oh yeah, we should have thought of that, duh, you know?
I think also in the global picture of it all, in the ends, we know that we've set some parameters of where we wanna go as a city, and then we entrust in our staff to go out and find.
What's wrong with your hands?
And
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll talk like a politician. Why am I supposed to do that or something?
Oh my gosh.
Not really sure with the hands. The global perspective of what we enable you guys to go pursue and give you some parameters, and then as you narrow in on a target, you use that kind of like, this is the growth of the city. As we get more information back filtered to us, down the road, it kind of goes into a funnel. So I think that we're enabling you to know what we want to do as a city with the ends and our growth, and then move from there. And I think that was hopefully empowered you to make some decisions
Yeah, absolutely.
without,
Mhm.
without coming back and sitting in front of us as a council. You should have some guidelines.
They can't safely be empowered unless they have that good playing field for you, can they?
Right.
And you want them to be nimble. The world doesn't operate slowly anymore. They have to be nimble.
Yeah, I think with respect to the limitation of selling property, right? So it's going to have to come to council. And I think it puts in perspective what the playing field actually is, and I think that's the intent of this scenario, right? We're just not, like, Tim, I agree with you, and as we talk about, hey, we wanna empower staff to go out and hunt or fish for these opportunities. Bluntly, a Niron opportunity has never come to Sartell. We may not see another one, right? An industrial opportunity of this size and magnitude for 2 more decades or more. And so, like, yes, I wanna say, hey, we need to empower and let them run, but I also look at and I think Anna was speaking to this a little bit, but the overall magnitude of this, of, hey, we've got a multi-million-dollar package we're gonna offer out. You're gonna have council members, regardless of the year, that have never offered an incentive out for 100,000. And so if they're not educated along the way and brought along, I would actually tell you that I believe that this policy slows us down. Because if not effective.
In general,
In general, slows it down because we're going to, staff is going to present to council a package. And there's going to be a lot of questions, and I'm confident that staff is going to do the work, do some of those studies and provide. But no one can ever anticipate what questions 1 of 5 members is gonna have. And so I don't wanna chalk this one up as like, hey, it's such a big deal, it's gotta be treated differently. But I just don't think we see that economic opportunity or big fish like that enough to get council and get staff to a point where, hey, this is almost routine or second nature, like it might be in a larger city. But I don't know. There's certainly going to be ones that are, and we feel super comfortable with that playing field. And I wouldn't want to change the playing field for this one example, I guess is the ultimate where I'm getting at, right? Is like, hey, we've got to let the playing field capture 90%, and then there's this 10% that we'll have to figure out how we navigate.
And we've talked along on how far this would get down the track before council would see it. We spent the last year outside of this policy trying to work on our transparency too as a community. So,
Interesting, yeah.
let's have to make sure we have that too, at the same time that, hey, we're not pushing it, looks like we're pushing it through because they followed what they're supposed to do, it came to us for approval, well, and no one else knows.
That's interesting.
Yep, that was like like 9th hour and we're ready to approve this thing and we're like, how do we lay this out so it doesn't look like that, even though we've been working on it since May, but we had to be confidential, and so it was trying to keep that in mind as well. So this, I mean, this is kind of a unique scenario, but I mean, honestly, I think Jed was the one who recommended, like, hey, put some scenarios together, because we've gone through a few things here where we've kind of been 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and have really been trying to implement policy governance, and this was a really good example of, it did work well, we managed it fine, it was timely, we ended up securing them. I mean, so obviously it is something we're celebrating, and I think we felt empowered to go chase after that, and felt like we were, you know, to your point, we were achieving the ends, and it met and matched the goals that the council was setting out for us, so.
So let's set that one aside.
Mhm.
What I'm wondering is this, what do you think about taking a couple, EL monitoring reports and walking them, let's just break it up?
Sure.
And then if we wanna come back into another scenario after you've done a couple ELs,
Yeah,
does that sound all right?
yeah, Rob can certainly pull up the PDF of the combined ELs. There you go. You're gonna have to zoom in. She's gotta get up to move.
Do you want to share?
No, I think you're fine. They'll have to tell us if there's a specific one they wanna go to.
We're in New Brighton again. And the chief was like, just want you to know that we agreed to take this meeting. You sent me the email the day after we didn't get the Niron contract. And I'm like, no shit. And he laughed. He's like, yeah. He's
They
like,
were one of them?
in like the top 10-ish.
Yeah, yeah.
Or whatever. So yeah, he was.
That's funny.
Decided
Whose quilts are those over there? Oh, yeah.
He's gonna start bundling up in them.
I need a hug.
Are we being recorded?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna just sit and eat my sandwich, so if you wanna pull another one, or unless you want me to walk them through.
No. I mean, you.
Said that wasn't said in the headlines.
I'm gonna let them tell me.
Great headline.
Will you open up the?
Oh yeah, everyone's like,
Well, no, just leave it.
lost all credibility now.
You have to watch the body cam video. It's pretty good.
Is that made public?
Because now he would like to. So council, I combined all of the 2.1 to 2.9 monitoring reports in one PDF. So these are all draft. They're not final yet, but they're as close to final as Stacy's gone through all of her reviews of them. I still have pieces that I need to pull data together, obviously. One thing I would love your feedback on, Rob, if you jump back to the folder and grab the cover page, if you see that in there. So when you get these reports, you'll get one of them, we'll zoom out a little bit, one of them at a time. So you'll get 2.1 or 2.2 or 2.3. So in November workshop, we are slated per the council calendar to review 2.8, which is in front of you right here. It'd be 2.8 communication and support to the council. My intent is to give you 2.8 as the monitoring report, which is probably 10 to 12 pages long. I mean, depending on how many provisions are in 2.8, they're extensive. But then putting this as a cover page to help you see, all right, if you want to go dive into it and really dig deep, the green areas are in compliance. Where I struggled in filling this out, you'll notice that when you get the report, that the global constraint shows as yellow because not everything is green. And then the monitoring data shows as yellow, and that's because one of the provisions under there is that we need to have a background check policy, and we are not done with that. We're working on it. We're not done with it yet, so we're not technically in compliance. I remember talking about this in some of our training sessions. If you scroll down a little bit, Rob, to just the three, here's what those are set on your cover page right now is meet standards, in progress, and does not meet. But as I was filling this out, I was like, well, I'm never going to put anything as red because like everything's in progress, right? And then what's the point of being either in compliance or not in compliance? And so I was curious what your thoughts are on the red, yellow, green, or do we just go either you're in compliance or you're not in compliance? Like there's no middle ground. Otherwise, I'm putting everything in the middle. Like everything's in progress, right? I mean, if you give that option, and is that the spirit of the accountability piece of like you're either in compliance or you're not?
Yeah, and that's the, I mean, in a project management, you're either in compliance or you're not in
Right.
compliance. The yellow came out through some of our conversation of kind of a, hey, I don't wanna feel that I'm red if we're working on it. It's not a, hey, you're not doing your job or you're doing your job, it's this particular item, obviously there's constraints against it.
Well, and what I want you guys to be able to do is look at this cover page and go laser focus on the red and go figure out what is that red piece, read through the interpretation and try to get an understanding of like, why are we not in compliance with that piece? And at the bottom, I have to answer, it either is or is not in compliance. And then what am I doing to get it in compliance? And so I would explain there that we're working on that background check policy, but it's not done yet. And so I want you to be able to look at this cover sheet and be like, all right, these all look good, but this one needs attention and I need to go laser focus into that. Now, don't pay attention, like I haven't actually filled out this cover page, but I wanted to just point that out to get a pulse on where you guys are at. So I think I'll revise these to be red and green. Compliance or not in compliance? Like it's one or the other. Okay. So you can close out of that and then go back to the PDF of, so this holds 2.1 through 2.9. It's 80 some pages long because it includes every one of them. You can see I've got comments in there of areas, but let's just pick one so I can walk you through, scroll a little bit longer here. Let's just go to like right here. Okay, so under privacy and accessibility, like I'm providing my interpretation of that provision. Keep scrolling a little bit. And then I need to be prepared to, and some of these interpretations are long because there's multiple factors. Keep going to the next page. And then from there, I need to be able to, one thing that Stacy really has in multiple revisions helped me break down the different pieces of the provision. So that's why you're seeing how long this is, because it includes privacy and accessibility. Keep going. And then eventually it gets to the point to where every single provision has the interpretation and then the compliance measurement indicators. So these are the things that I'm saying show whether we're in compliance or not. And then the next section, you can keep going, is the data itself. So those 5 things, you can stop right there. So that's one entire provision there. That was provision 2.1.2 shared the interpretation of that provision. It shared what I believed were indicators of how we're in compliance, and then it shares the data that you will see with this monitoring report. So I will have to submit with the monitoring report these data sets in order to be in compliance. And so when you're looking at that this monitoring report for 2.1 is what I'm under. There's how many different provisions just under 2.1 itself, and then all these data pieces that have to come with it for your review. So you're gonna see, this is where, you're gonna see information that you historically just kind of blindly trust is being done. Now it's gonna be required as data with the monitoring reports. Like in order for me to prove that I'm meeting 2.1.2, which was about privacy and accessibility and confidentiality of city buildings and spaces, I have to be able to show that we've have our insurance audit done, that there's been a review of ADA compliance on infrastructure projects, that we have a badging system that has permission levels, that we have a security camera system with permission levels, and then a report on any instances where buildings were unable to be accessible per our engagement policy. And so you would review each one of those data sets to determine compliance. So,
Did I hear you right on that last point? You mentioned you list anytime the situations where it wasn't in compliance?
right,
We're gonna review this once a year.
and we'll,
Hypothetically, we're reviewing this one in November,
mhm.
and there might be an instance where the card reader was down 6 times throughout a year. You've got to journal that. Is that what you're saying?
Depending on the interpretation. So like on this one, my interpretation, if I recall correctly, was trying to prove that we're keeping city facilities open. And so was there any, let's just say the community center, for example, like was there a time when that community center was closed and not opened per our policy, our engagement policy? And so then that's what Nikki will have to track anytime that, right. Like, let's say it was like a weather or something and it wasn't in compliance with there. So it wouldn't necessarily, my interpretation of it wasn't necessarily like a badge reader being down, but that we didn't keep that facility open at its business hours per the policy that says you're gonna keep this place open. And so it will require, and all the department heads have been given, I went through every single monitoring report and I laid out a tab on a spreadsheet for each one of them, the things that they're going to need to track to be like to show data for each of these monitoring reports. Building it this first year will be a heavy lift and it'll take some grace, but once you get it built, then it's just keeping it updated. But for every single, this is just 2.1, so 2.1 probably has, I don't know, Rob, can you go to that, scroll till you get to the end of 2.1, I'll tell you when to stop. 2.1 probably has, I don't know, 6 or 7 provisions in it itself. So each one of those has data associated with it. And that's what your monitoring reports will be. Keep going. So they're extensive. I mean, they're gonna take a considerable amount of time and review. Okay, so 2.1 included 4 provisions. You can see the 4 listed there. And it kind of summarizes them at the end. So when you receive the 2.1 with respect to interactions with treatments of residents and customers, 2.1 will have 4 provisions and 4 different sets of data points that are proving or showing compliance or not in compliance. Tim's like,
How are you gonna find somebody to replace you is what I'm trying to think.
I am going to, I have a 2.5-hour meeting set with Nikki and Kaya because that's part of one of my requirements is city administrator succession is that to Ryan's point earlier when he mentioned that as we were talking through the Project Maxwell thing, like my job is to make sure that if I win the lottery, not get hit by a beer truck, if I win the lottery and I'm gone, that somebody else can quickly step in and take over. I am required to do that. So and Nikki's been kind of along the way and so is Kaya, so they have a pretty good grip, but it's, getting them caught up to speed for sure.
Anna, so not going into the weeds on this at all, for the data, so you list 4 different areas where you have the data to back up. But if I read above that, it's 2.1.1 through 2.1.5. Are we saying 2.1.5 didn't need data to back up that you were in compliance?
Will you go up, Rob, and see if there is actually, it might just be a typo on my part. This is where I gotta go through here. There might not have actually been a 2.1.5. Stop. Yeah, it actually ended at 2.1.4. I copied and pasted a lot of the monitoring reports over, so if I just need to edit that. But that's where I gotta go through these before I bring them back to you, because there's probably more areas than just that. But, so to answer your question though, if you go back down to that summary, Rob, it should match. You should have the exact number of provisions listed there as what are like the number of provisions that are listed above. And then each one of those provisions have anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 different data points that are, depending on the provision, that are proving compliance. And then when you get that monitoring report, you're gonna have 4 different sets of data to review for those 2.1.1 through 2.1.4. And it's gonna be data that you are not used to seeing, but that's the accountability piece of this. Like, you're no longer blindly trusting that this is just getting done, you're actually getting to see it and get to know that it's being done.
So can we go to the monitoring report now?
That's this.
Oh, this.
That is this.
But what about where the data is?
So the data will just get attached to it as a, you'll get the cover page, which is the red and green, then it'll be this document, and then it'll be any of the data attached with it.
You don't have the data on this one?
No, you don't have the data in here, because I haven't pulled it all together. But when you get that, it'll be, you know, a complete packet. It'll be cover page, monitoring report, and then any sets of data. And then I'm also required to publish that complete, you know, monitoring report packet for 2.1 on the website for compliance as well.
And she wouldn't, I mean, it's illogical to think that she would have any data because the policies until today weren't activated. So she had no start date. Now she's got a start date. You activated all of the ELs. Today's the day that any data collection would technically start.
Can I run?
Which is important to realize too, so if you get a monitoring report, say next month, all you would be able to get is 1 month's worth of data. That'll feel a little while, a little weird for a while.
Yeah, until we get a full year through. So, so I helped, as I was working on creating this for department heads, help them to understand when particular reports are due for each of them. So this is the workshop that it'll get reviewed, and this is the regular meeting. But you can see on the bottom here, so these are all the data sets that, for every single monitoring report that Brandon and team will need to pull data together for. Let's look at Rob's, which, so these are all the items of data that Rob needs to be tracking throughout the year and pull together for different monitoring reports. Half of it he already does, he just doesn't realize it, but, so. Just to give you visibility of that, but and you can kind of see the time frame here of November workshop, and then December regular meeting is going to be 2.8, so that'll be the first one that you guys will review, and then also making sure that we're kicking off that new council member orientation with council members starting in November. Or, I mean, being elected.
Likely for others, under column C, when we list 2.8, could we just for the first year list what that actually is?
Yeah. I think I do on your guys' version. This is just the staff one.
Tim will appreciate it later on.
So I didn't necessarily expect that we would go through, you know, these monitoring reports in any grave detail. I just wanted to make sure we had a good understanding of what that format looks like, the data that's required with it, and I wanted to get a good grip of that cover page, because I think that will help you guys kind of, especially in this first year, laser focus on the areas where we're not in compliance. Otherwise, we just, from a staff level, have, you know, each month there'll be a new monitoring report that we're honing in on and building and working to get to you. Once we get that built, anybody I've talked to that's lived in this model has said, like, that first year is a heavy lift, but then after that, it's, you're updating the data that you've been collecting, so.
And the cadence will be at the second meeting of the month, or?
It kind of depends. So normally our workshops are always with the first meeting. And so then it's, you know, the workshop review will always happen at the first meeting, and then the actual meeting that we bring the report to. Yeah.
Now,
You're gonna watch them.
No offense.
None, nope. I mean, really, the part of the intent with policy governance is that, workshop, and we're still trying to wrap our head around this from a staff level, because we kind of got to a point to where workshops were in some ways a crutch for us, because we were bringing nearly everything to you to save us from having to bring anything at a public meeting. But really, workshops should be more educational in nature, and you guys reviewing, monitoring reports, but otherwise, staff has to be prepared to bring items at a regular meeting. Anything you'd add, Stacy? Is that?
No, I wanna get a sense for where all of you are at with this, now that you've actually seen a monitoring report, sans data, because we can't, but now you've seen how she's interpreting those policies. You've seen how she's creating, compliance indicators, those measurements. Your job will be to define, or to determine, was the operational interpretation and the data reasonable for each of those? And then, did the data demonstrate compliance when you hit those? So now that you've seen one, as far as she can prepare it, where are you at with this?
I just had a question, because you asked earlier which of these we would want to see interpretation for, right?
Yeah. I mean, because it's a heavy lift. It's that balance between how far can you trust that their interpretations are going to be reasonable. Some of them are kind of no-brainers. They're restricted by accounting procedures, or they're restricted by what the state allows you to do anyway. You really need to see an operational interpretation. Whereas maybe with something like ends, you do want to see more of the operational interpretation well before she sets up her whole internal system to make that good stuff happen. So if you felt inclined to see some of those operational interpretations before she and her team go full bore, what would those be within your executive limitations? What would keep you up at night without seeing the operational interpretation and making a judgment about its reasonableness well ahead of her going full bore?
So, Council, I remember when we were going through the training workshops, like one of the items that was kind of giving us heartburn were some of the financial ones of, like the tax rate and the reserve policies and when we prepared the budget this year, even though we were 1 foot in and 1 foot out, we prepared it with policy governance in mind and ensuring we would be in compliance, just to help with some of that heartburn, because you will not, per the council calendar, you will not look at those financial related ones again until almost exactly a year from now, because you'll have just approved the levy and budget. And so, like, that's one of them where it's gonna be almost a full year before you look at the financial ones again, but also you approved the budget and the preliminary levy. Like, we can't really change it, so it's,
Well, there's two things there, right? One is statutorily, we have approved the preliminary levy, right?
mhm,
The final levy is December.
December, yep.
And so
But we can't go
we can't go
up, so,
absolutely, right?
yeah.
But still fully in bounds to have a change to the levy before, prior to December.
Yes, I just wanted to check, our council calendar calls for the ongoing financial condition and activities to be reviewed in July, financial planning and budgeting to be reviewed in,
Financial condition activities is you could monitor more than once a year.
yeah, you're right, I think I got that one on there twice. And then financial planning and budgeting not till September.
If you're curious right now, you can go to the financial condition activities monitoring report draft. It's in your binders, and look at how she's interpreting that. You can do that right now.
Those were I recall those 2.3 and 2.4 being the two areas that gave us the most heartburn.
I mean, I guess the question is, hey, what would you want to review
Yeah.
don't know, right? And so I guess if you're asking that to give direction on which ones we need to get done first, we probably need to think through that. But operationally, like, I don't know how Anna's giving direction to staff if we haven't already done interpretation, right? So there's a
Per
chicken,
interpretation.
per interpretation, yep. And
But if you look at that interpretation in 11 months or whatever, and go,
Yeah.
holy crap, that was not a reasonable interpretation. She's already aligned the truths to achieve that, what you think is not a reasonable interpretation.
And I guess that's why I would say, why wouldn't everyone just take a review of them, of the interpretations that are done, and determine, are there any we need to, as a council, review or not? I mean, I don't,
And come to the November workshop with that?
yeah.
Yeah, because it's 89 pages. You're gonna, yeah.
I thought it was suggesting, like, having us answer that so you knew which ones to do first.
Oh, no, I've done them all.
Okay.
But now you can,
Oh,
yeah.
how are we moving forward if we haven't done them? Okay.
You've done them all.
Yep.
But they may not, you might look at them and the majority you say that whatever isn't reasonable.
And I agree with you, we wouldn't wanna get.
To next
we would
November,
July,
yeah,
well, hey,
yep.
whoa, this is way out, right?
And then here we've been operating under them the whole time, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is, you're gonna make a commitment to look through all of those EL operational interpretations, including the measurement plan. And if you, as an individual, wanna flag something to make a case for it not to be reasonable, that's all you're asking. This is not reasonable or it is reasonable. Then you can bring it to the November workshop.
Mhm. Yeah.
Will you justify it back to it? Is that a
You're gonna have a conversation.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation about it for sure.
conversation about it?
Yep.
It's not, nope, boom, you know,
No.
but
Because remember that it's not, like, my interpretation is my interpretation. It's not wrong. It's my interpretation. Your job isn't to convince me to think like you're thinking. It's my interpretation. But if you as a majority are saying, that's not what we were going for, then we need to go back and change the provision so that you are getting what you're going for. If you can get your head wrapped around how I'm interpreting, you're like, yep, it maybe isn't how I would interpret it, but it's reasonable and I can understand it, thumbs up. But if everybody collectively is like, yeah, that is not what we were going for, your interpretation is reasonable, but it's not what we were going for, well, then we need to make a change. And that's what we want to make sure we catch sooner rather than later, so that we don't get to know, October of next year and it's like we've been operating under one sense and you had a different thing in mind.
and they were all created by, didn't we write most of
Yeah.
them, and review them word for word?
The provisions, yeah,
Provisions,
not the interpretation.
Not her interpretation.
Right.
But she was in the room as we discussed it, so.
Yeah, that certainly helped.
she had
That
some
did.
takeaway from our discussion of what we were.
Because I could keep that context in mind for sure. And I did as I was going through, absolutely.
Somewhere in your print handouts, there is a short, 2-page article I wrote on how to assess a monitoring report.
Yeah, they have it in their binders.
So that would be worthy of you reading through before you do your own walkthrough of all of those operational interpretations. It just reminds you, what is it that would make you think something is not a reasonable interpretation? Can you tell them exactly where that is so that they can flag it?
Yeah, it's also online, which you guys will notice that there's, Kaya put QR codes in here so that you can quickly get to the online portion, because I know that you'll likely want electronic
And those are
access.
private, right? Public can't access those, or are we making them public?
No, they have to find it, but it is on our website publicly. Because I have to publish, to meet the requirements, I have to.
Sensitive in them, right?
Right, no.
So there are plenty of reasons for why something you would think it was out of, or not a reasonable interpretation. One is that whatever she wrote doesn't address all the key aspects of your policy. She might have completely forgotten one phrase, one clause in there. And so by reason of it not being complete, you deem it unreasonable. It's not good. Okay. So that's one example of why it's so important to read that article, to get your head screwed on right before you do your walkthrough of all these operational interpretations.
So
Secondly, I would say that this is our first time doing the policies, right? And so I'm concerned, we might have implied something that we wanted in the policy. And when we get her readout or interpretation of it, it's like, well, hey, that misses because our policy wasn't written well.
Because your policy.
provision,
Or provision.
Yeah.
Maybe provision.
provision.
Well, provision is technically a policy.
Yeah.
It's just part of the policy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a
So-
lot of conversations we had, and we were wordsmithing some things,
Mhm.
and it was implied like, hey, this is what we wanted to cover. We'll see if we cover that
Yeah.
in her interpretation
Mhm.
of it, and if we don't, it's not that I interpreted it incorrectly, it's likely that we didn't bring full clarity to what our outcome or desire
Yeah.
was.
There's also ones, as I've gone through them, where I'm like, I'll be curious to see if you leave it as extensive of a provision. When you add all these extra words and then I have to go interpret every one of them and then I have to have data to go to every one of them, it's like, that could be an area where you as council go through and you're like, yeah, we maybe didn't mean to impose that much work. Like, is that really where we want staff's time and attention to be spent? Like, are we getting at what we're wanting to get at, or could we make that more succinct to ease up on the data and amount of work on staff side? Like, there has been moments where I've gone through and had that thought, where I could see you guys going through it and being like, whoa, this is 7 pages long of an interpretation because the provision is that extensive. Like, that's not what we were going for. Like, our goal isn't to make burden, but we want accountability.
We'd like to create bureaucracy at its finest.
Yeah. The monitor and report step-by-step guide is behind all of your monitor and reports in your binder. So if you flip to the monitor and report section.
Now and just sticking a piece of paper or a sticky or
Yep.
whatever it is in there so you can grab
It is right before the annual planning tab, if you happen to see that one.
Step-by-step guide.
Yep, there you go.
Step-by-step guide.
Purple annual planning is right in front of that. See the purple?
I don't know if you, oh, do they all have the same colors? There we go.
And then the interpretations are,
Within the monitoring reports.
Every single one.
But you don't have the monitoring reports in your binders.
They don't have them in there?
No, because they're all draft. Like, it was sent out in your Friday update.
okay,
And so you'll have to, this PDF document is in your Friday update from Friday.
Could they practice by using their forms? Does it include the forms so they can put the questions right in there so they can use them?
Yeah, your tracking spreadsheet for making notes on each one of them is in the monitoring report tab too. Not saying that you have to use that method, but if it's helpful, go for it.
But that's not available electronically?
Um,
So if they had, say, 2 monitors, they could have uploaded with a monitor.
Yeah, let me-
put on one
let me
and-
double check. It might be on there.
Both gonna be available online?
Yeah, it is. That's what I was not entirely sure if that form's on there or not. But yes, it is already uploaded. There's a QR code in here where you can get to it.
I don't see us carrying this a lot,
Oh, you don't?
so I would love it if it was online. And searchable.
If you go to the very last tab in your binder, it says online version, so you can just scan that. Now, it's a QR code, but it at least gets you to where you need to go on the website. And then the entire binder, I just wanna make sure that monitoring report form, yep, the notes form is on there, so all of that is online for you.
Do you have any other questions on your assignment for the next month's workshop? For absorbing what's in those monitoring reports making sense. I know it is.
So our next, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that'll be November 11th, which is Veterans Day.
It's actually the 12th, or it's the Tuesday after.
So
Yep.
it's the 12th.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I was printing that out, okay.
Yeah, if it was me, I'd been giving myself a weekly assignments. That's a whole heck of a lot of reading to do.
Yeah, it's-
Well, I mean, that'll be a great opportunity for this council to walk through those.
Yep.
But it'll also be a great opportunity for two council-elect to sit as a
Oh, that's
panel
a good point.
and hear why we are
Yeah.
thinking the way we're thinking. It's gonna be, like, this'll be their first blush with it, so it's gonna be overload for anyone.
Including us.
But
Yeah.
I think them hearing us talk about it gives them a basis for later on.
Is there a way to fit in an orientation to PG?
In between when they get elected in that meeting, probably not.
If they get elected literally a week prior, and they're gonna be,
They might quit before they start.
Writing down my homework, I'm reading what, 89 pages of?
All of the EL, Executive Limitation Monitoring Report drafts, focusing just on the operational interpretation that includes the data measurement plan. And your question in your mind when you're reading them is, was this a reasonable interpretation? And if it wasn't, according to that, what did I call it, document, step by step, then flag it, flag Y, and bring that to that workshop. And you'll need to make a case to the rest of the group as to why you think it's not reasonable. So it isn't editing, it isn't wordsmithing, you're only asking in its totality, is this reasonable or not? Or y'all are gonna make judgments. Because they're still good drafts, they're not final, but it's enough there, and it's been through the process a couple times to be pretty darn good. Not perfect, but pretty darn good.
happy birthday, Carrie.
Look how red she is.
She's out.
She's like,
Say hi to the bartender winners.
So, it is almost 8.
Motion to,
Where are you at? Do you wanna do another scenario? Do you wanna keep the scenarios for, and we can pick one up and do one at the next meeting? How do those scenarios, how would they be useful to you to help kind of with your understanding of your discipline in the process?
I think the scenarios take a little time for us to read through and find what relates, and to do it here would be kind of
It's a little harder?
harder, longer. I mean, I like just pausing long enough and then you tell me what the answer is, it's great.
Yeah, just about kills me to do that.
I also look at those three and go, like, those three are just so unique.
I hope you're right.
I think it's just like having another interim fire chief appointment anytime soon. I don't anticipate, hope to God, we don't have another director or suspension or termination.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I almost, honestly, Stacy, I almost wonder if, I mean, they get the notion now, we went through one of them and they understand, like, these were scenarios that I felt like from a staff level, like, they were super awesome learning opportunities and went really well. And we felt empowered, but also knew when, we had executive limitations in place. I almost wonder if, it's sending over to them the completed one, like, I have the cheat sheet version, where she has gone through and identified, just so that you guys can see, like, okay, I'm connecting the dots of, like, why the full picture. I think,
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, but also I think having these questions and these like line items templated somewhere for us, so that as these things come up, it forces us to center on these
Yep.
items instead of going down a different path.
mhm.
Well, and as you all develop your process for onboarding, where you're part of training the new council members, there's nothing that says you couldn't use the template and come up with a brand new scenario that helps them think about something that they should,
Yeah.
maybe it's a sticking point that's just not sinking in.
I think onboarding new council members should be a scenario.
Well,
Well, and I think the beneficial ones for us would be if all staff members would review, like, hey, where do they see this governance model helping them have more clarity in their job that they didn't feel like they did before? And feeding that to us as scenarios, because that's where we're gonna be able to see this, I mean, as Anna highlighted, like, in this scenario, hey, I've already completed it. I'm sure there's a ton of others out there that didn't go well. And how would we do that under this new governance model? Because that's, in a tactful way, providing counsel, like, hey, here's some of the more repetitive scenarios.
That you see more
Here's how we see
frequently.
them playing out.
Mhm.
So that we don't get to that naturally and have it not play out in accordance with the governance model. I don't know, that to me is what's more helpful
Mhm.
than looking at Project Maxwell, just because I don't know when Project Maxwell is coming again.
Yeah, so some of them that Jed and I had talked about when he was recommending these, go through these scenarios was, that come to mind when you say that. And we've already one of them we've already kind of talked about in one of our trainings was when we presented from a staff level, the grant positions. And that was one that didn't go well because you guys were kind of in a spot where it's like, okay, either we're gonna go against public safety, the grant PD positions. We were trying to approve something ahead of the budget and so that was one that we talked through that's like, yep, that's not how it should go going forward. Now, on the flip side, and I think we've talked that one through and have a better understanding of how that should go in the future. On the flip side, we spent a ton of time on a staff level on the budget process where we laid out the financial management plan, we showed all the levers, we made a recommendation, we stood by that recommendation for both the financial management plan and the budget. And we've not run through the process in that way. Historically, it would have been more of a really, truly, kind of council going back and forth and getting into the weeds on some of that. And that process is something that you will experience every single year. And we're going to continue to refine it and get better at it. But really owning that financial management plan and budgeting process and making that recommendation and having the data to support it and the usage and that's something you're going to see every single year is going through that process. It's not unique like a Project Maxwell. That's one that you'll experience and staff are gonna make a recommendation. We need the data to support it. Walk you through how we got to that decision point, what levers did we choose and not choose. And so that's a scenario that I think positively impacted us from a staff level because it empowered us to just really own that budget and own our financial management plan and own the capital projects that we were recommending and stand by that recommendation. And it's going to be something that you experience every single year. It's not like a weird Project Maxwell. That budget process is going to be refined in that same way. So those were two just that come to mind that are more likely to happen that I think we've learned from and will continue learning from. But and looking at Brandon and Rob, and Carrie walked out, but it's our weekly department head meetings. We're having to walk through in our own heads of like, oh yeah, we're owning that decision. We need to make sure we can support it with the right data. And just really having the confidence and empowerment to make those decisions that historically we maybe would have brought to multiple workshops or, so. I think we can kind of keep track of some of those scenarios and use those as examples going forward, just for things that are more routine versus a Project Maxwell or a, you know, interim appointment or.
Well, then, unless there are other things that you wanted to talk about, I don't have anything else to go to commission.
They're really bummed about that.
I know. Most often from here on out, I'll join you remotely. I just, it was important to be here tonight because this is a big discussion. But, mostly long distance.
There was, at one point, you and I were supposed to do some training, is that, do we not need to do that?
Well, no, that, we don't need to do it in person unless
Okay.
you're dying to, and it's really